Hey friends, before the video starts, I want to give a quick shout out to Bad Vibe Storytelling, who will be featured on today's video. He just hit 32,000 subscribers, and that is just incredible. Okay, that's enough fanboying for me. Let's go ahead and get started with these 4 incredibly true, scary, creepy, make you poopy your pants stories. Alright. The next story that I'm about to read might be extremely disturbing to some, so trigger warnings and viewers' discretion advised. I've always wanted to share this story, and I've decided to use an old throwaway account since I usually just lurk. I have no real way of providing my credibility, but if you've ever visited or lived in a rural part of South Asia, you can probably vouch for me in saying that it's a lot more plausible than one might assume. Also, this ended up being a lot longer than I thought, but I wanted to recount it precisely the way I remembered it. I had one of those moments recently where a lot of things came together in my brain to make sense of an event that my child mind couldn't properly comprehend at the time. So, my mom was born and raised in the UK, but she is of South Asian descent, and since I'm mixed, she tried really hard to make sure I'm in touch with my culture. This meant that, as a child, we made a lot of frequent visits back home. It's like every summer I can remember was spent there, and then it suddenly just stopped after this incident. My mom's family back home live in an extremely rural part of the country. There is a lot of poverty surrounding our family home, so we rarely left our relatively nice part of the village. I was never allowed to explore, and coming from the concrete jungle that is London, I was always so curious. I'm going to explain what happened on this particular day the way I remembered experiencing it, and then I'll explain what I failed to realize at the time. I was 8 at the time, and one of my uncles from a neighboring village would often visit with his children, and when they did, my mom would let me go with them to the small hut-like shop that sold sweets and snacks like 15 minutes away from the family home. My cousins were 11 and 19 and both male, and it was broad daylight. To get to the shop, we walked through a small DIY road, and on both sides is what I would call the jungle. It was basically just a lot of trees and bushes as far as the eye can see. You can't really see anything beyond the trees. It's just a lot of greenery. I'm mixed with East Asian, and I definitely get my looks from my dad's side, so being an obvious foreigner in a rural part of back home meant that I was pretty used to strangers staring and asking me questions. I was also used to creepy men that would tell me I was beautiful because I have pale skin. My mom warned me about these men and made sure I knew to stay away from them, so the road to the hut was paved with creepy people, making creepy comments and my cousins basically telling them to leave me alone. In less pleasant terms, there was also a group of young guys. Some of them had motorbikes and some were just chilling. One of them waved at me. He seemed friendly enough, and I had met so many people that my mom was convinced I must remember from last time that I had zero recollection of, so I just waved back and went about my day. Once we got to the hut, we immediately started losing our self-control with the snacks. The owner was super friendly, and he let us try a bunch of the sweets he had. He also had kulfi ice cream for the first time. I distinctly remember being really excited because my mom and one of the ladies that worked as a cook both loved kulfi ice cream, so I thought it would be a nice surprise for them. I asked for 3 and the nice guy gave me 4, and so my hands were full and they were quickly melting, and he told me to run, go home quickly. I told my cousins I would start running, and once they finished, they would catch up with me. I would still be in their line of sight, plus it was daylight, and it was a busy road. I start running back, and there were a few older aunties stood at the top of the road, and something about their presence gave me a sense of security. I felt a lot safer knowing they were there, and paired with the fact that my cousins were able to see me clearly, I felt comfortable enough to just walk back leisurely, minding my business, eating my ice cream. I passed a group of guys, and the one that waved to me came over to me. He said I was X's niece, right? X being my uncle. and he jokingly took one of my ice creams and said, "She got me an ice cream for Mama." Mama means uncle in our language. And so I just assumed he was a friend of my uncle's. He asked me when I arrived and how I was finding the country. He was so friendly, and he didn't look like the stereotypical creep. When I said I was going to go home, he said, "Why don't you let your uncle take you? You can ride on my motorbike." I think that's when something clicked in my mind, that maybe he wasn't the friendly uncle I thought he was. That's also when I realized I was pretty much circled in and was surrounded by the group. It's also when I realized I couldn't see my cousins, or the group of old ladies, which also meant they probably couldn't see me. I wish I could explain in words how helpless and afraid I was. I had all the threats in the world explained to me by my mom, in a country where I knew I was vulnerable, and had to be cautious, and I still managed to find myself in a dangerous situation. Luckily, my cousins came running and shouting, probably because I was their responsibility, and the guys ran off into the jungle. This creeped me out because there was nothing in the jungle. It was just trees as far as the eye can see, and I knew that it would be nearly impossible to find them in all of that. We caused quite the scene, and the villagers seemed to react as if they were already on edge. When we told my family what had happened, I was basically on a house arrest. My mom refused to let me out of her sight. I was pretty shook up about the whole situation, and so, honestly, I was kind of grateful for that. I put it down to my paranoia, but at the time I would get overwhelmed feelings of being watched. Our village is quite small. Like amongst them is everyone who knows everyone sort of thing. My uncle is also a big community figure, and he's very well known amongst the villagers, which is why the men probably put two and two together, that I was his niece. Having foreign family over is usually a pretty big deal, and having a niece that is mixed race was also a very big deal. I'm sure word got around. He realized that there were a group of men on motorbikes who would frequently go past our house. They stayed a decent distance from our home though, and that they weren't anyone that we would have known. It's creepy to think about now, the lengths they were going to. A couple of days before we were due to fly back home, I had my second, last and worst encounter with a particular friendly uncle. It was night, and it was like every other night. We would play board games and card games in the front room, because it was so hot. I went to my bedroom and I was playing on my Nintendo DS, when I saw, out of the corner of my eye, someone at the window, staring directly at me. It was him. The worst part is he had the most creepy, sick and twisted smile I'd ever seen. He put up a finger to his lips, but I did the literal opposite and started screaming hysterically. I had been on edge since the ice cream incident, so what might seem like an overreaction was just my natural response. I can't really tell you what happened next because no one has ever told me. My very large uncle and his also very large friends are not known to be the friendliest of people, but I was told he was dealt with, and that he would never bother me again. We recently received a wedding film from one of our cousins' weddings, and part of the film was her leaving to get to the venue, and I noticed that jungle was no longer there. It had basically been cut down. For the first time I could see beyond the greenery. That's when my mom explained to me that my uncle had it cut down not long after that particular visit, because of the headcutters. It sounds even more sinister in my language. My entire life I wondered what would happen to me if I had gone on the motorbike, but now I know with reasonable certainty what his intentions were. During that time, a gang had been kidnapping beggar children. It took a while for the village to realize because it's not unusual for beggar children to go missing. When we were there, people were vaguely aware, and it was becoming a trend. A couple of months later, a head was found. It became known in our village, but people tried to keep quiet to avoid getting a bad name. The problem went away once a lot of the greenery was cut down, so there was nowhere left to hide. It's also when they realized the magnitude of what had happened. The weird thing is, I've known about the headcutters for a while. I knew it was something that had occurred in our village, but for some reason, until recently, I never put two and two together. But now that I have, I think often about what nearly happened to me, but more importantly, what happened to a handful of children in our little village. I think about the fact that beyond our relatively small circle, no one thinks about them. No one is haunted by their deaths. So to the creepy uncle with the motorbike, let's not meet again. I wish the children had never met you, and I hope no one ever has the misfortune of meeting you ever again.
So this process happened just a few months ago, so it shouldn't be hard to find. So at the start of the year, we were introduced to our teachers. All of them were good teachers except Miss C. So we went through our classes, and in each one we got those cheesy beginning of the year introductions. It was quickly clear her class wouldn't be a normal health class, as evidenced by the fact that during her introduction she went off about how terrible her divorced husband was. So classes started picking up, and her insecurities somehow kept making it into lectures. One day, a few weeks into school, she just stopped showing up to class. You know, her job, consistently. And now at this point, everyone was cutting her some slack because she was a single mom, but it just got worse. We would have to do the whole units from a workbook with improvised substitutes, who were actually most of the time school staff with no idea what they were doing. This culminated when Miss C missed 2 weeks of school for no apparent reason. Most of the class could see her mental deterioration. Me and some friends in class started noticing some form of distress from Miss C. More and more stuff about her personal life would leak into lectures when she was there. Suddenly, it came to a head. She suddenly became distant and developed a tough shell around her. Miss C actually started coming to school consistently too. She started bringing her kids into class, closer to toddlers but still. I have a hunch that she started doing this to help justify her inaction to her employers. One day, she just sort of broke down in class about how horrible her ex-husband was for not taking equal responsibility for their kids. It was a bad joke at this point about how long Miss C would last before being fired. Unlucky for us, it was too long. We just sort of endured lectures from this mentally unstable woman. Mind you, she was doing a fine job at suppressing traits associated with that around other school employees. One day, we come in and she wasn't in class, breaking her streak of actually coming in. We then got our answers about how long she would last. A counselor walked into the room. Everyone knew what was up. She was gone. But what had gone down exactly? She had walked into her ex-husband's house on a Sunday before that class period. Her excuse to her ex was to deliver cold medicine to her kids. After threatening to call the cops after her home invasion, she locked herself in the bathroom. She called the cops and unlocked the door to the bathroom. She then walked over to her coat, pulled out a gun, and opened fire on her ex's girlfriend, killing her. Missy was pinned down until the cops showed up. This wasn't her first offense either. Suspiciously close to the time when she hardly showed up to her job, she had several assault charges against her and somehow managed to keep it a secret from her job. Weirdly enough, students who didn't have her as a teacher didn't take it seriously. It took less than 30 minutes after the info was made public to the students for them to make a meme page about the incident. Weird how that worked. It got taken down. Anyway, mentally unstable teacher who committed aggravated murder and let your insecurities leak into your teaching. Let's not meet again.
The story I'm about to tell you happened yesterday night. I live in Nantes, West France. I'm quite a petite girl and I avoid confrontation whenever I can. I'm pretty good at it because, since I can remember, I had a very strong sixth sense thing. I try to avoid people who make me anxious. It allows me to survive some very dangerous situations and prevent one kidnapping. But that's not part of the story. Yesterday I visited a very close friend of mine a few days ago. She broke her leg, so I decided to cheer up by giving her a few gifts. The atmosphere was so nice that I didn't notice when it got dark outside. Despite the late hour, I decided to go home. I said goodbye to my friend and left her apartment. I was about 40 minutes from home, but I walked the distance many times without any problems, so I thought it would be the same this time. Oh, how I was wrong. Less than 5 minutes passed, and I just felt it was going to hell. I was approaching one of the many bridges in our city. I didn't see anyone around, and I thought my senses were playing tricks on me. This happened before, so I kept on going. The bridge was about 20 meters in front of me before I heard a conversation and a giggle. I turned my head slightly and saw 3 men walking towards me. I felt a cold sweat on my back, but it was too late to turn back. I didn't want to show them that I was afraid. I know this type of behavior provokes more harassment. I kept walking and turned the music down. I didn't take my headphones off because I didn't want them to know about my suspicions. I heard their footsteps behind me. They were saying something, but I didn't know what because they were speaking in a different language. I was also already on the bridge when they caught up with me. As I said, I'm a petite girl. They were over 180 centimeters tall, and they surrounded me. I had no choice but to go ahead. A shudder ran through my body, and I didn't know what they wanted or what they were saying, but I felt that I was in danger. They kept talking to me, and they leaned over and whispered something into my ears, and they laughed. The sound will haunt me for the rest of my life, and at one point they noticed. I was doing my best to ignore them, and then the worst began. They started making animal noises. It may sound strange and maybe even funny, but it was terrifying to me. They howled and growled and whistled and kissed the air softly. They did these things very close to my face. I was desperate, but where would I go? I was on the bridge. I would kill myself if I jumped into the water, or at least break both my legs if I were lucky. Those 2 minutes to cross the bridge felt like an eternity to me. When we got to the end of the bridge, I was sweating and close to tears. I thought I was going to throw up. I was shaking, which seemed to amuse them even more. And then a miracle happened. Someone called my name very loudly. I looked up and saw someone approaching us. He was a very tall man, several years older than me, but I didn't know him. I had no idea who he was and how he knew my name, but it didn't matter to me at the time. I felt he was my guardian angel, and he came over to us, and he was staring furiously at the 3 strangers. I didn't see their faces, but they fell silent. "What are you doing to my girlfriend?" he asked, still frowning at them. He stretched out his hand in my direction, never taking his eyes off of them. "Come on, sweetheart." I did not wait. I didn't know who he was, why he was helping me, but I didn't care. I gripped his hand tightly and almost nestled against his shoulder. My heart was beating fast and loud, but I was so thankful that he came to me. 3 strangers and my savior exchanged glances, and they were silent. I was actually starting to panic and thought that they might have attacked him because he was there alone, and I wouldn't have the strength to help him if they would attack. But it didn't happen. I almost heard their teeth grinding when he muttered something. My savior held my hand tightly and watched them. They turned back and went back on the bridge, and we stood at the same place for some time. He looked at me and smiled, and at that moment my body gave up. I started shaking uncontrollably and almost drowned in my own tears. He didn't say a word. He just held my hand and gave me time to cool down. After a long moment, he offered to take me home. We walked slowly and talked about various things, actually. He was talking all the time, and I was just nodding. I found out that he was walking near the bridge and noticed the whole scene. He decided to react and help me, if I turned out that his assumptions were correct. I asked him how he knew me and how he knew my name. He looked surprised and then smiled. He said, "I didn't know your name." He used a name because it was one of the most popular in our country. When we got home, I was still shaky but happy. I offered him something to drink, and I don't live alone, so I really wasn't worried about letting him in. But he kindly declined, and we waved goodbye. I can't believe how lucky I was yesterday. If I hadn't met him, I don't know if I could write about it today. So, Luke, thank you. Thank you so much for saving me. I hope to meet you one day. As to these three strangers, I hope one day you understand that your behavior is reprehensible and you will change your attitude to women who walk alone, and I hope to never meet you again.
Ms. M, it's been about 12 years or so now. I know you don't work there anymore, thankfully. I don't know what could have possessed an adult woman, 50 years old no less, to torment and torture a child to their breaking point. Maybe you're just a miserable old bitch, or was a loser in school, so you targeted other losers to bring yourself up. But how you treated me, and evidently others, was not only unprofessional, but very cruel and damaging. I was a good student before. Ms. M had my family members in years prior. Unlike me, my cousins and siblings are rowdy and can be a handful. She had words with my family before, so when I came along, I was a symbol of my family, which she would take out her anger upon. I was meek and obedient, a perfect target. Ms. M would humiliate me any chance she could get. She would bring me in the front of class, call me stupid, idiot, ugly, pointed out when my legs weren't shaved, told me I looked like a boy. Mind you, I had long hair and stuff, just didn't wear makeup at that age. You would talk to me very slowly if I asked any questions, talk to me like an actual dog, bad girl, go fetch, beg, etc. Told me I smelled bad. The list goes on and on. She would sometimes aggressively pat me on the head and shout, "Good girl," when I completed one of her dog commands. She would actively encourage the other kids to make fun of me as well, and further isolated me from everyone. I started to fear any interaction with her. I feared my classmates as well. A boy in my class was being relentless and made me cry one day, so I retaliated and threw a pencil at him. I was berated heavily and treated even worse after that. So I learned to shut down and take it all. My grades slipped. I cried every day at home. I kept most of it to myself, which Miss M probably knew I would, which is why she went so hard on me. My parents did try to get my class switched, but the school refused. Not only did Miss M act like an angel around other adults, but the other classes were apparently packed to capacity, so I couldn't switch. But I also think my parents didn't try very hard. The teacher conferences made things worse each time. She'd be alright for a day or two, but the hammer would come down harder. I had to keep all the torment inside to survive. She made fresh hot chocolates for the class the day before Christmas break. When she gave me mine, I was scared and accidentally knocked it all over myself. Always was a clumsy kid. Instead of being concerned in the slightest, because it was literally scalding hot, she just let out a flurry of screams and threatened that I had better get it cleaned up quickly and spotless, or she would make me sorry. I did as I was told and ignored the searing pain in my foot. I was not allowed to call to get a change of clothes, and I was the only one not allowed to have more. The pain in my foot stabbed literally every second. It didn't let up all day, but I was so terrified, I said nothing and didn't shed a single tear, though it hurt like hell. When I got home and pulled off my sock, my skin came off with it from the burn. My mother was livid and finally stood up for me. After Christmas break, Ms. M was overly sugary to me. "Why didn't you tell me about your foot, sweetie?" And was overly accommodating. It scared me. I thought it was a trap. To my surprise, it lasted about 2 weeks. Must have had her ass handed to her. She wasn't as bad as before, but still sought to crush my spirit. On the last day of school, she refused to let me take any pictures of her. I wanted one to burn. She was very grouchy that day towards me, almost acting defeated. Although my grades were bad, I skimmed by and was moving to middle school. Her dog was off its leash, and she was powerless to keep her toy. She was hoping I'd fail. After 6th grade, I stopped caring about school. I failed a year, barely skirted by others, landed in the dropout prevention program in high school. I had few friends, none of which I still have. I found it hard to trust teachers or authority figures anymore. I never made scenes or anything. I just sat there quiet and did nothing. before I actually tried, actually cared. I had teachers' disappointment in me because of how well I performed in math and on tests. I never had test anxiety, and they wanted me in the mathletes one year, but I just didn't care, which I attribute, at least in part, to Ms. M. She changed my life for the worse. The psychological damage Miss M did to me cut deep. It's hard to convey in a brief post what it was like every day for that whole year. She tore down what confidence I had. She made me afraid to trust anyone. She made me believe I was worthless. She made me feel every insult and criticism to the bone. She made me close into myself and learn to take abuse. She made me believe I was completely alone and had nobody in my corner. I was stupid, ugly, worthless, not even human. The kids from my school that came with me reinforced it as well. They also believed I was just a dumb dog and treated me as such. She dug her claws in deep, and the scars still remain. I have tried to grow past it, but it's a hard thing to overcome. So to you, Ms. M, you're not a teacher. You're an abusive psychopath who used her powers of authority to tear down and relentlessly torture a child. I hated you then, but as an adult, I just feel sorry for you. I don't know what could possibly go through an adult's mind that would make them see a vulnerable little girl as a target for sick games. Maybe you saw yourself in me and hate yourself, since we were both kind of outcasts. So you desperately tore me down and encouraged others so you could finally feel like you belonged, even if it was a bunch of children. Either way, I'm glad you were finally removed years later, and I hope your stain on the world is soon wiped clean. I hope that others you did this to, which is why you got removed, live happy lives without having you as even a passing thought. We are not weak, and do not deserve to be held as your victims. You did teach us that there are bad people out there. We may have struggled from it, but we pushed on. Hopefully none of us will ever meet you again.
Hey friends, I want to thank you for checking out today's video. If you haven't yet, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe button to be notified when I drop a new video. And if you guys want some more behind the scenes action, make sure to follow me on my social medias. Links to these will be provided in the description field down below, including my public Discord. And if you'd like to support me even further, you can become a channel member or Patreon for $1 a month, which gets you early access to my videos. And with all that being said, I want to thank you guys once more and thank Bad Vibe Storytelling for joining me. And you guys keep it spooky. Okay, Violet, what do you want to say at the end of the video? What would you like to say to everybody?
End the video, Dad Moth. I want to say thank you for gonna do all the shout outs. Bye.
Thanks for all the shout outs.
This is for my dad.
Oh, thank you.
I love my dad. Say woohoo, Eric.
Okay. Well.
Bye.
Can you say Jensen?
Jensen.
Jensen.
Jensen a lot, please, Dad.
Yeah. Come here. All right. Adios, guys.
Adios. Can I keep recording, please?
Yeah, we'll record after this, okay?